Project Tower on PlayStation 5 is a game that wears its influences proudly, taking cues from Returnal with its third-person bullet hell action, but leaving behind the roguelike elements for something a little bit more traditional. So here, you're going to be climbing a mysterious tower where each floor is a unique handcrafted level packed with challenges. But does it stand tall amongst the competition, or is it just another climb you'll want to forget? Let's find out. Alright, if you enjoy this video, do us a favour, subscribe and like it, it means a lot. The story of Project Tower kicks off with an alien invasion. The Hicks, a ruthless life form, have taken the remnants of humanity prisoner to serve their goal of universal conquest. Their plan, a brutal program called Project Tower, where prisoners they're forced to fight their way up towering structures as part of the Hicks Army Training Initiative. So basically you play as one of these captives, with freedom only possible if you can reach the top. Now the game does frequently present new story beats, whether through cutscenes or text scattered throughout the world. Now it's not perfect, I will say that. Around the mid-game the narrative loses steam and shifts into a just shoot kind of everything vibe with a few twists, but those didn't particularly catch me off guard. At its core, Project Tower is a third-person action game centered on fast-paced combat as you battle your way up floor after floor of increasingly challenging enemies. Each floor culminates in a boss encounter, and this is where the bullet hell elements shine, or perhaps overwhelm. These towering foes bring chaos, raining destruction in patterns that force you to stay sharp. While the initial bosses as well ease you in, the difficulty here ramps up quickly, and by the late game they demand near perfect execution. Now, the core gameplay loop involves a mix of precise shooting, dodging waves of projectiles, and using special abilities to turn the tide. So to facilitate this, the controls allow for sprinting, ducking, dodging, and jumping, with 5 different weapons to experiment with by the end game. Now unfortunately, the controls and the weapon balance here leave much to be desired. Movement, particularly jumping, feels floaty, and while the second machine gun stands out as a reliable option, the other weapons like a slow shotgun and an exploding bow often feel situational or outright ineffective. On top of that, the dodge roll, which you'd expect to be a key mechanic in a bullet hell game, appears to lack any sort of invincibility frames. This isn't inherently an issue, but with randomized attacks and multiple enemies flooding the screen in the late game, it sometimes just feels impossible to avoid damage. And here I do want to say, bullet hell games thrive on delivering overwhelming odds while still offering a slim but clear path to survival. Project Tower struggles with this balance, often leaving you feeling like success is more about enduring hits and hoping for a break over skillfully dodging them. The core enemies then as well throughout the levels, in contrast, offer little to no challenge. A few well-placed shots and they're done, no matter their size, and it really struggles to keep you invested in these moments. It basically ends up feeling like a paint-by-numbers experience until you do hit those bullet hell boss encounters. Where Project Tower does somewhat shine, however, is in its transformation abilities. You'll unlock 1 per level, and while the floaty movement persists, the creativity behind these transformations kept things interesting. From morphing into small creatures to squeeze through tight gaps, to unleashing destruction as a xenomorph, which admittedly controls horribly, but it's still good fun. The game manages here to inject some variety into its gameplay. There are even sections where you can fly or turn into a laser, and let's be honest, it's pretty cool. Basically, I have to give credit here for the creativity, but it does feel like the game could have benefited from streamlining the system. Instead of a new transformation for each level, focusing on maybe just a few abilities that evolve and appear more frequently might have created a stronger connection to the mechanic. It's kind of that age-old rule, you know, less is more. Level design, unfortunately, is another area where Project Tower struggles. While the locations are visually distinct, they take far too long to hit their stride. The first few hours boils down to little more than running through corridors broken up by occasional rooms at the end. It's a repetitive start, definitely drags down that pacing very early on. Now, things do improve later, I will say that, with stages like ice-themed level where you'll need to move quickly as the ground shifts beneath you. It's one of the few moments, honestly, that felt truly exciting. However, by the time these more interesting ideas do show up, it's kind of a bit too late to really redeem the experience. To make matters worse, then, some sections lean into frustrating mechanics. One particularly annoying transformation requires you to navigate areas where only certain platforms are visible when transformed. It quickly devolves into a weak game of memorization because you have to jump and land on them. It leads to repeated deaths and a lot of unnecessary frustration. So yeah, with this one, all in all, you're looking at about 5 hours to complete Project Tower, and for me, it was closer to 6 thanks to the increasingly challenging bosses. Unfortunately though, the difficulty, I want to go back to this, it doesn't stem from inventive design or clever mechanics. Most of them barely move, in fact acting more like stationary bullet sponges than dynamic threats. Instead, the challenge ramps up because of the sheer chaos they throw at you with those relentless bullet hell patterns that just often feel ridiculous. The final boss in particular was a nightmare. I only managed to succeed when luck finally went my way, and that ties back to really one of my main gripes here. The game struggles to strike the right balance between fair and unfair. Some attacks are simply unavoidable. Jumping to dodge one laser, for example, often leaves you floating right into another one because it feels like you are jumping in outer space. So yeah, look, when it comes to gameplay, Project Tower has some good ideas, but it's undercut in several key areas. Controls lack precision, with floating movement that works against you in a game demanding tight mechanics. The levels start out overly linear and dull, enemies outside of bosses are simple, and the difficulty spikes on the bosses, mainly the last one honestly, just unfair. And let me be clear here, this isn't a get good situation, it's a flaw in the design. You know, invincibility frames here honestly on the dodge roll could have made a world of difference. Even beyond that though, I ran into issues like inconsistent collision detection, standing still in a few bosses. I wanted to test it out. Sometimes bullets didn't damage me, but other times they took 10% or even 30% or 50% of my health for no clear reason. They were all hitting the same area. That kind of inconsistency isn't where it needs to be, and overall I think Project Tower not really quite where it needs to be. Visually then, Project Tower is a mixed bag. It feels like a lot of pre-made assets were thrown together in an attempt to achieve an ultra-realistic style, and in some ways it works. Pepsi Man, your protagonist, looks fine enough. The environments can at times be quite impressive, and some of the bosses and the enemies, they do showcase at least creative designs. However, the game struggles with a slew of technical issues that do drag the experience down. You know, playing on a PS5 Pro, I encountered noticeable frame rate drops, thankfully not during boss fights, but still it's disappointing given the hardware. Popping there was also a major issue, especially in one outdoor area where objects seemed to load in constantly as I moved, the grass in particular. Then there were just cutscenes which these suffer from such low resolution and heavy pixelation that it's genuinely jarring. The jump in visual quality between the cutscenes to the in-game world feels massive, and not in a good way. The same can then be said of the transition from level to level. You walk through a portal and the game essentially freezes for a few seconds. It borderline, honestly, at times I thought it like it was nearly crashing. Unfortunately then, the audio in Project Tower is another disappointing aspect. The guns sound decent enough, but beyond that, the lack of sound effects here are simply weird. Footsteps are missing nearly all the time. There's no rustling of clothes, no movement at all. Even the transformations, arguably one of the game's standout features. Once you are in alien mode, completely silent. Each alien just lacks any kind of real sound design, and the same goes for the enemies. On more than one occasion, I was snuck up on simply because there were zero audio cues to alert me. In fact, there are stretches of the game where the world is eerily silent, and not in a deliberate or atmospheric way, it just feels unfinished. I even cranked up my volume at one point just to check if the audio mix was unusually low, but no, it's simply not there. Now as for the music then, while the individual tracks are fine on their own, actually quite well done, they don't suit the game at all. Slow kind of melodic piano pieces often accompany moments that should be intense or exciting. It seems like it's going for drama. When that doesn't work, it just undercuts the atmosphere, and yeah, if anything, the music feels, I don't know, disconnected from the gameplay. Overall, Project Tower is a game I really wanted to like, but sadly I can't say that I did. While it has some good ideas like the creative morphing abilities used for in-world kind of basic puzzles, I guess, and a handful of entertaining boss moments, it just falters on a fundamental mechanical level. Movement feels imprecise, weapons are underutilized, they fail to basically stand out against the enemies you face, and by the end game, frustration takes over with bosses, again, particularly that last one, that lean heavily into unfair randomized attacks. They leave you in a really bad situation. And again, look, I know saying that will in fact get good comments, but let me be clear here. I've beaten all of the Souls games, I conquered Returnal, I even endured the brutal odds of Jump King. The issue here isn't difficulty, it is design. There's a fine line between challenging and unfair, and Project Tower lands firmly for probably the last boss or two at least, in the latter. Too often it felt like I was just waiting for a lucky break rather than relying on skill, and that saps the fun out of the experience. Again, there's a difference between the odds being stacked against you and the game itself being stacked against you. Now, this all said, I do at least appreciate the ambition behind the project, and I'm curious to see what this team does next. It's a small indie studio. It is incredibly cheap as well. It's about $20, $25 or your regional equivalent. But as it stands today, I'm going to say, if you really like a sci-fi experience, you want something kind of Returnal-esque, then maybe take a look. I'm going to be giving it a below average 4 out of 10 because it has its moments where you will definitely have fun and you'll definitely see the potential of the project. But too often, they will be quickly dragged down by a slew of issues. So will you be checking out Project Tower? Let us know in the comments. I wish I brought more positive news, honestly. It's always hard when it's a small indie development like this, but it is what it is. Unfortunately, that's what I'm here for on this channel. But I hope you enjoyed the video either way. Subscribe if you did. And yeah, see you all on the next video. Cheers all.